The first time that I incorporated birds in my work, I guess, was inspired by a camping trip I was on with my brother, where he's a big birder, member of the Audubon Society, and he had a book on a field guide, and he told me that, oh yeah, this is a good area to see pileated woodpeckers and western tanagers, and he showed me what they look like, and then later on, he gave me some binoculars, and then later on I actually found these birds, and it was kind of a eureka moment because it sort of appeared to me like, or felt like this whole parallel reality that I had been living in my entire life had opened up, and that with merely with the enhanced optics and a little bit of knowledge, I was able to access this other world, and that seemed to parallel some of my concerns in my work, and so that just became a hobby that then later started pouring into my work. Natural selections came out of these collages that I had been making just prior to it, where I was, I had these voids out of the field guides that I was cutting out of to use for collage, and I began to insert these sort of Land's End catalogs into the voids so that they emulated the biology, the biological structure of birds, so that when you first looked at these collages, you thought you were looking at birds, and then when you got up close, you realized that they were composed of zippers and flaps, and that they were made out of like Gore-Tex and other sort of material made from petrochemical industry. And I guess I was conflating these sort of two ways that people are now accessing nature through this sort of like the petrochemical outfits that they wear and these field guides that they use to name things. And I thought that it was kind of, I like the idea of this double take. I've always liked that, like making the viewer think they know what they're seeing, and then when they look at it closer, they find out it's something else. So, and I also thought there was something interesting about how the environment may have changed so that the birds now had to wear these crazy outfits. And so that then led to this work, Natural Selections, which I made in Maine in 2000 when I was up in Skowhegan. Pretty early on, when you're looking into kind of survival mechanisms within nature, you see camouflaging as one of the ways that that nature can hide from predators. And I thought that there was this new kind of landscape of this sort of technological landscape, and that the birds were possibly evolving to kind of emulate their new environment. So they're sort of trying to blend into the new scenery, and the new scenery is not entirely natural. So that's sort of what I was thinking about with that work. It's funny, but I think that the American transcendentalists came about right about the time when wilderness had been destroyed, or when Manifest Destiny was sort of, kind of coming to fruition. And so we've been sort of loving this thing as it died away, as wilderness disappeared. So, so it's just a question of that kind of relationship sort of morphing into through different technologies since then. But certainly the technologies we live with now in the wired world have exacerbated a sort of discombobulation, I think. I mean, I think there are moments where you lose yourself, where you're like completely in the moment that you're living in, and and there are very few instances where that actually occurs to me. But occasionally, when I'm like looking at a crazy new bird that say I've never seen before, the only thing that's in my mind is that thing that I'm looking at, and then everything else disappears. And so I guess that's kind of close to it. I think physically, though, probably the best way I get to it is probably being churned around in giant surf, because I really am one with nature. I really am, like, my whole body is completely immersed in it. And that somehow seems like as much as close to the sublime as I can get without getting really, really high. The inspiration for Migrant Fruit Thugs more or less occurred around around the same fig tree that appeared that appears in my work, Natural Selection. In August and September, usually my figs are attacked by starlings, and I generally run out into the backyard to scare them off. And one day I saw some birds in the tree, and I ran out there to scare them off, and I realized they were, for us, for Brooklynites, a relatively rare-ish bird called the red-breasted grosbeaks, and they happen to be migrating through. So, and it seemed like a visitation from another dimension, and so I, of course, didn't scare them off, and let them eat as many figs as they wanted, and that, I guess, in turn inspired the work, even though the birds depicted are not red-breasted grosbeaks. I guess the thing, well, I mean, when you start looking into nature, you start seeing this sort of Darwinian struggle. You know, that's always at the heart of everything, right? And I guess that's the core of that work in particular. But the thing I guess I liked about Penetrators was it seemed to have a lot of psychosexual drama maybe built into it. The way the woodpecker in that work, the way she's jabbing her beak into the throat of the snake is, I think, reminiscent of the way mother birds feed their children. Mm. You know, so there's this sort of maternal thing going on. But then there's this sort of possibly sexualized element of the penetration of the beak into the gullet of the snake, which maybe might be at odds, I guess, with the sort of maternal thing. And then there's the plain old Darwinian struggle of predator versus prey. And I sort of felt like, you know, that the sort of sexual, maternal, and Darwinian struggle that seems to define the natural world seemed to be embodied in that particular work. So that's why I did it.